Oh, you got to perhaps adjust the volume. The question. Is it on?
Yeah, it's all ready to go.
Okay, when holding auditions, what is your criteria for selecting dancers? If I'm holding a general audition, which is an audition without any particular show in mind, in other words, if I'm examining the dance scene, per se, for future kind of thought, then I'm really going after technique and appearance and build. What a lot of dancers don't realize is that you can't appear well on stage unless you have a good dancer's body, you know, and dancers who are fighting that kind of thing would be wise to look elsewhere in their career, because they may become a brilliant technician and they're going to fight that all their lives, because most shows, you're not only auditioning for the choreographer who is there at the time looking at your dance technique, you're auditioning for maybe a producer or somebody like that who has money in the show and is not the least bit interested in technique. That's your problem. He's interested in what the person's going to look like in his show, and he's just liable to say, and I'm being quite brutal now, I'm sorry, but, you know, we can't have her. She's got a terrible face, or her teeth aren't good, or she's too fat, or something like that. It's really very hard for dancers. Now, when you
technique, are you looking mainly for ballet training?
No, ballet and tap and jazz, an all-rounded technique. So that, and a person who is very musical, if they can't work to the music or they have no really keen musical instinct, then you're going to have problems when you put them in a show, because you're working on, in show music, very syncopated beats and odd phrases and things like that. Then when you come to an audition which is for a specific show, it depends on what you want. For instance, in a recent show I've done, Fauntleroy, I know that they're going to perform a very elegant waltz in Dorincourt Castle. So I'm looking for quite tall dancers with a great deal of grace and a great deal of poise. So you look specifically for that kind of thing. And you're not going to look for short dancers at all. They also, in that show, have to perform a big 4th of July parade. So you know that if somebody is going to dance the Statue of Liberty, she has to be very statuesque and have the right kind of carriage. The Irish cop has to be a good tap dancer, so you're looking for that kind of a dancer. The boys who dance the Spirit of 76, again, tall. And with again, an all-round technique. They have to be able to do ballet, they have to be able to do jazz, and they have to be able to tap. That's the most important thing for any dancer, is to be very versatile. Now, you come to a show like Anne and Green Gables. If I'm only doing Anne and nothing else, then I'm looking for dancers who have that kind of effervescent look. They have to play children, so they have to be very young looking, and they have to be quite short, because they're going to be playing on stage with a girl who preferably is 5 foot tall, who's playing Anne, and the girl playing Diana is going to be 5 foot tall. So you want them really in that age range. It can vary a little wee bit. So it's a question of what you're auditioning for and what the types are. And unfortunately, the dancer auditioning doesn't know that. They merely come in and think, I'm here because I dance well. But another very important thing looking at an audition is that you're not deceived by the type of clothes they audition in. You know, if they come in to do jazz and they're wearing a straight classroom balletic ensemble and ballet shoes, they're not going to do it as well as a girl who comes in a very sharp kind of jazz outfit and dances in the right kind of shoe. That's important. Or if they try to tap dance in a ballet shoe, then you know they have no tap training. I mean, there's 100 little giveaways.
Yeah.
But the thing is to be prepared, and also be prepared with some kind of variation in each department, because the choreographer may say, I would like to see something that you do yourself. Sometimes that's a good way to audition, because the person is confident in that, and they usually have put in all the things they do well. And if they're able to sing a song, all the better, because they're going to have to sing in the show anyway. Does that give you a rough idea of auditions?
Okay.
And you have here, are the Canada Council grants for Charlottetown increasing? Do other musical theatre centres in Canada get Canada Council grants? Most of the big theatre centres do get a grant from Canada Council, but they're not increasing according to the cost of developing theatres. In no way. I mean, it's just not enough money. And the trend now is for the theatres to be as commercial as possible and earn some kind of revenue so that they don't require grants to keep them alive.
When you say commercial, what do you mean?
By commercial, I mean shows that appeal to an audience, and so that they sell tickets.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can do marvelously artistic things, which every director enjoys doing, but it may not sell a ticket. It depends on what your season is. If it's a summer season and you have primarily tourists and people who are there on a holiday, they're not interested in something that is unhappy or sad or has a sad ending. They want something that has some kind of sparkle to it.
Speaking of sparkle, I'm fine today, thank you very much.
Good for you.
Am I interrupting something?
No, we're just taping some stuff.
Oh.
So basically, that's where the grants stand.
Okay.
Does that give you the information you want on that?
Fine.
Okay. When faced with lack of production money, in what area of the show do you cut back? You try and cut back in the area that doesn't show to the public.
Which is
Always. Well, or you become inventive in another way. I can only do this by giving you an example. For instance, I had a very low budget for a show called Amy, which I did this year. And so the main thing was to have early enough talks with the designer to explain to him that you were going to do it with a kind of a skeletal set, something that doesn't require a lot of scenery without any big units or things like that. And that you wanted a very natural look in the costumes, so the costume designer isn't going to design a lot, but she's going to try and beg, borrow, steal, and purchase stuff that's already made, and just design a few things. And that's her job then, is to try and make it inventive within that area.
Mm-hmm.
But you try and do it where it will not harm the show, or you have to think the show on a lower budget. And by thinking the show, you can do every show in a different style, you know. So you try and think the show in that kind of shape, so that it is, and sometimes it's good, because it makes you inventive. You know, you have to think of ways to do things, to convey to the audience the situation you want, but in the same way, do it with no scenery or do it with no costumes. The thing I try not ever to do is cut back on the talent, because I think that makes a show. I think you've got to have the most talented people you can possibly get on stage. And if you then rely on the acting and the singing and the brilliance of their performance and really good lighting, it's very hard to cut back in the lighting department, because that can cover up an awful lot of things. So you really go for the lighting.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
If you had limitless funds, what type of production would you work on? Well, with limitless funds, I'm still, you know, working in the musical theater, so I would really love to do a show that I was able to compete with shows that have limitless funds and show in this country that we can do it equally as well. That's the only thing that holds us back from saying, you know, we are absolutely as good as Broadway. In the performing aspect, I think we are. We know how to put them together. We have the performers to do it, and we can do it with just as much expertise. But we lack funds to do the kind of concentration they have on sound, the kind of equipment they have, and that practically the rebuilding of an entire theater to house a production, so it becomes special to that theater, like electric stages, electric flies, great sound systems, endless gimmicks for costumes. For instance, if you're, such as in Chicago, Gwen Verdon, who is not a young woman, you know, to play that kind of role. And yet she had to work with very scanty costumes, but exquisite, especially woven body suits, you know, like covering her arms, her thighs, everything there was about her. I mean, which would cost the earth, but made her look just super on stage because she still deserves to be there with that great talent, you know? So that's the kind of production I would like to do, and I would certainly like to see enough money that anybody producing musical theater could exchange and send their productions across the country so that we have more musical centers.
Yeah.
Where I work in Charlottetown, we're the only original musical theater in the world that makes an attempt at doing original products. And we get feedback from the West and from the middle of the country that why don't we see these productions? And the only reason I don't see them is lack of money. So we should be able to have enough money to tour them. And then we would have a living year-round musical theater rather than a short-season musical theater. And that company would be working year-round, and they would improve, naturally, you know, as a company.
And you were talking the other day briefly about that you'd like to have a winter center in Toronto for Charlottetown.
Well, that's what I mean. If we had enough money, if we had limitless funds, we'd build a theater in Toronto and have another home for it, you know.
And just do Charlottetown in the summer.
Yeah. And we would play our season in Charlottetown, a season in Toronto, and then we would tour the rest of the country. And they're, in that way, they'd be working all year round. But nobody has limitless funds.
Okay. So question 5 there.
In what direction do you see Charlottetown moving in the future?
Realistically.
Realistically, I think it's going, the productions are going to have to get smaller. I don't think that I will be a part of that because I've worked too hard to build it to a competing kind of musical theater with the United States who don't believe in cutting back. Their philosophy is always bigger and better than ever. That's why I have a great deal of admiration for the kind of thinking, and they'll take a chance. They're gamblers. But realistically, with the costs of performing actors, what it costs to put on a show, and the kind of upkeep of that building, which is really not our responsibility of the festival, but in a strange way it becomes our responsibility to kind of make the building survive. I can't see any other way but cutting back, which will ultimately mean that they will have to make a very serious decision in Charlottetown to drop Anne of Green Gables. I've not recommended this to them because I don't believe they should, but it takes 25 people to perform in Anne, and that dictates the size of the company. Now, if they drop Anne of Green Gables, the door is open to create any kind of festival they want. They can create a festival with 8 people if they want. But there is the existing contract with Anne of Green Gables is that it requires 25 and 19 musicians. So that's basically the start of your company, and it's big. They're in a difficult position because if they drop the show, they're dropping history. The charisma of Anne of Green Gables is so unique on that island, and now it's reached the point of 17 years. It can reach 25 years. It can be the most unique theatrical thing that ever happened in the musical theater in this country, and it's happening in one place, in the National Theater on a little island. I think that kind of history will be incredible, 50 years from now.
When you're talking about cutting down and maybe dropping Anne, then are you thinking that they might go into straight plays instead of musicals?
I don't know what they would do. You see, it depends on what any future artistic director would do. I would not be happy cutting back now that I've reached the point. I've nursed this thing along for 17 years, and I feel I've created a very unique thing in theatrical history in this country by introducing original products. They can't always be the greatest, but out of it we've had several hits. And I think you have to have that kind of courage. I mean, anybody can take a musical, such as we're doing right now, The Music Man, and anybody can take a Shakespearean play, and anybody can take a Neil Simon's comedy, and all they have to do to make a decision to do that show is to write to New York and say, we're going to do the show. Send us the script, send us the music, send us, everything comes in a package. It's like buying cornflakes, you know.
Yeah.
It depends on whether your appetite is adaptable to that kind of thing. And if you don't like cornflakes, you're not going to like the show. You're not going to like this version of Music Man. If you don't like something else, you're not going to like this version. But if you're in love with the Fiddler on the Roof, you're going to love it anyway. You know, it's right there. All you have to do is be a smart director and do a good job on it. When it comes to original musical theater, you have to work very, very hard to make it, first of all, work, basically just work on stage. With the right kind of timing, the right kind of orchestrations. Everything is new, you see, and creating the character for the first time. And that's what happened with Anna Green Gables. Gilbert, in the original version in Anna Green Gables, was a speaking role. I dictated the fact that it would be, from day one until 17 years later, a dancing role for a boy. Now, when you cast that show, you cast it with a dancer who can sing, because that's his strength in the show.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where it all began. So, I don't know what I can't remember what the question was. So that's really what it's all like.
That's fine. Okay, so the next one.
Do I have any specific career goals for my own future?
Are you thinking of leaving Charlottetown?
Yes, I am. Yes, definitely, because I don't think it can go on in the way I feel it should go on, unless they establish some kind of a winter home for it, mm-hmm. and it has a bigger touring future. And also, I think then if that's the case, I'm ready to move on to something else. I don't know what at this point. I've had several offers to teach in community college, musical theater. I might like that. I don't know. I still get quite a thrill out of creating something original or just doing a show, such as the Music Man. So I'm at that point in my career where I can't make up my mind. I know I don't want to do as much work as I have been doing. I want a little more time off, and I want some free time, and I'd like to just do certain things that I would enjoy now, because I basically am not building a career anymore.
Right.
You know? So I just want to do something I like doing, and especially working with young people.
Think you'd keep up with community theater?
That I love, yeah. I would always keep up with community theater. Who knows, they might have me work backstage on props or something like that. But, yeah, because that's where the young kind of blood for the theater comes from. More so than other schools, mm-hmm. by far. Because they get on the stage and they experience what it's all about, and then you can depend on them. You know, for instance, you have dancers who work in community theater, and then you pull them into something very specific, and I'm referring in particular to yourself and Cora, where you had 5 hours to learn a number to do for the Regan benefit. But I knew in 5 hours you could learn that from your past experience, because your minds are quick. Yeah. You can adjust to it. And you get a dancer out of a theater course in school, they're not going to adjust that fast. Mm-hmm. And get out and do it, you know, without a worry. You know, I wasn't even there to teach. Somebody else taught it to me. Yeah. So that's what it's like.
Okay.
A big truck just went by.
Okay.
Are you pleased with the strides Canadian musical theater has taken in your lifetime? Yes and no. I think we started going in the right direction when suddenly our Canada Council, the Performing Arts, or whoever heads this kind of thinking in Ottawa, made a decision that Canadians had no culture in their lives, and they didn't have enough intelligence to select what they would like to see on the stage. So they decided to dismiss all commercial theater, all musical theater, as trite, mm-hmm. Everything that went along with it, and it suddenly became, we had to either have experimental theater, ballet, and opera, which all have a marvelous scheme in the thing, but doesn't please everybody. And I think they really made nitwits out of the Canadian public by saying, you don't know anything, we're the ones that know the kind of culture you should have in your life, and this is what you're going to get. And suddenly the plays, a person could write a play which was a miserable, sad dialogue in a sewer between two people, and it was supposed to be meaningful in our lives. Or there would be a horrendous car crash, and the whole dialogue or the whole play would take place at the scene of the accident. Somebody is dying, and they reiterate their entire lives over this. And we just took a giant step back, I think, where other countries such as the United States and England, who have had a theatrical culture for much longer than we have, accepted the fact that, and especially in England, that the variety theater, the circus, the ice show, the opera, the ballet, the play, the light comedy, the farce, no matter what it was, that was all theater, and made tremendous scope for a performer. So that, and I realized this so much when I went to do a show with a very fine actor, John Mills. I had only seen him in very heavy drama, marvelous character parts, brilliant actor, and he's done films and stage shows. And we were doing a musical, and I suddenly decided that he had to do a dance in it. And I said, well, you have to do a dance, and I hope you know that it's not going to be a problem for you. And he says, you want me to dance? And he did a fabulous tap step in a corner. And I said, where did you learn to dance like that? He said, I grew up in variety. That's where all my tricks are from. That's where my timing comes from, variety. That's where I learned it. He said, no matter what I do in a film, and he played that in Ryan's Daughter. He played that incredible cripple, you know, what an acting performance, for which I think he got an Academy Award. But out of his variety timing came that skill, you know, and that's where the whole scene. Now you've worked with people in this country, and they come into it, and you say, okay, I want you to do a Shuffle Off to Buffalo, or a Fall Off the Log, or a Razzmatazz Exit, which may be totally just a broad term to say the kind of feeling you want. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And they haven't a clue what you're talking about. Not a clue. That was vulgar theater back a few years. Mm-hmm. Suddenly, when the money got short, the government and Canada Council all took a great big switch and said, you got to go out and make money for yourself. Why don't you do shows that have commercial appeal? We'll help you, we'll help finance your tour, we'll invest money in it now. If you do something that pleases the public, why don't you get into musicals? Why don't you do, you know, everything was a big push. But we lost 15, 20 years, and in between we lost that time. The time that I was plugging ahead and doing the kind of thing that I felt we were heading for. Now it's great that I went through that whole period where I was, well, of course, he only does musical theater. Yes, well, of course. I suppose you're going to use all those terrible spotlights. You know, I've had actors say that to me. And I said, look, that is the theater. You know, that's the kind of thing we're doing right now. And I said, just go into the theater, because whether my shows are the absolute most brilliant shows or in between, I've done both. You know, things that I'm terribly proud of and things in between. But I guarantee that that theater has always had people in the seats, and it's always been full. And they're there, and they walk out of the theater, and they have enjoyed themselves. And what more purpose can I have in the theater?
I agree.
So profound, isn't it? It's just incredible. But, you know, that's it. I'm going to write all this in a book. Why don't you write a book?
Maybe someday.
Whose dance influences do you see in your own work? Oh, God. Every teacher, everything I've ever done is influenced in my work. I have the kind of thing that I suppose you'd call it a photographic memory. I see something, and the general overall quality and feeling of the thing goes like that, you know. It's even in sports. The way a body moves in sports, if I don't know the technique of the sport, I know what you have to do. So I taught myself to ski. I just knew what a skier had to look like, and the way the balance goes. So I think the influence has been everybody. My early teachers certainly were a great influence. I had a super teacher when I was just a kid, when I started at 8 years old, and she was a great tap dancer. So she taught me how to really tap. And then all I had to do was go to the movies and see Donald O'Connor and Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly and I could pick up their steps and their style very quickly. So that then when you're doing something now, which is a nostalgia thing, I want a kind of an austere routine here. You can choreograph that kind of thing, but you're not using the same steps. But the body, the feel, everything that's there has to go with it. My original ballet teacher in New York, Anatole Vilzak, he was a brilliant ballet teacher in a Russian style, very flamboyant. That's the kind of approach I like to ballet, not a kind of withdrawn English technique, like a Russian technique. So everybody's had an influence on me.
Okay.
But, I don't know, you get to a point where you know, I've got an awful lot to offer yet. I just want to offer it in the right places. But I want to kind of I don't want to fight the battles that I've been fighting.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks very much.
Does that give you enough stuff?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
it's
perfect.
dazzling.